People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Dawn Neeson. And almost 7 years after the nation first voted to leave the European Union, Rishi Sunak has announced a new deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol.
We have delivered what the people of Northern Ireland asked for and the command paper promised. We have removed the border in the Irish Sea.
Well, in what is a historic moment for the UK, should we embrace today's deal for finally bringing an end to the Brexit stalemate? That's the topic of my digest next. Then my panel give their view, and oh my God, have they got a view. Joining me tonight, we have the gorgeous Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda DeLucy. See what I mean? It's going to get feisty. But is the Windsor framework, what is that about? Shoddy work from the PM after DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson said that there remain key issues of concern. And would Boris Johnson have done any better? I'm not convinced, but we'll debate whether the Tories need to bring back Boris. He's never going to go away, is he? Later in the show. Also coming up, the shocking story of Ernesto Elliott, the Jamaican criminal who had his deportation blocked by woke celebs and a host of Labour MPs. Then, just 6 months later, he engaged in an 8-minute street brawl where he would have murdered in cold blood. Astonishing. Reacting to this avoidable tragedy, Fleet Street icon Kelvin MacKenzie hits out the lefty do-gooders and demands that the UK gets tougher on foreign criminals. You don't want to miss that. That's uncancelled. Plus, as the government's terror law reviewer says that Britain should allow the return of Shamima Begum. Some of these people just don't go away, do they? And other British women who joined the Islamic State. Should the ISIS brides, and that's too soft a name for them, stand trial in the UK? We'll debate that in the media buzz. And as Buckingham Palace prepares to announce that Camilla will be known as Queen rather than Queen Consort after the coronation, does this go against the wishes of the late Elizabeth? Camilla's biographer, Angela Levin, delivers her expert insight on this constitutional conundrum that's coming up. And after Cambridge University opened a postgraduate course for non-white students, isn't that racist? Only to, quote, give opportunity for students from underrepresented groups, are universities discriminating against white working class students? Spoiler, yes. We'll chew over that one in The Clash very shortly. A first look at tomorrow's front pages as well, and a new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass coming up too. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Dawn Neeson. Let's go. That's my digest coming up, but first, the news with the very lovely Polly Middlehurst.
Dawn, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. Well, the Prime Minister has been addressing the House of Commons, saying the new Brexit trade deal for Northern Ireland means businesses and people can now chart a new way forward. Rishi Sunak says the Windsor framework, as it's become called, will deliver smooth-flowing free trade across the UK whilst protecting Northern Ireland's sovereignty. And that includes the Northern Ireland Assembly being able to stop some EU laws affecting the flow of goods, which he called the Stormont break. Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed the new deal, adding the red and green lane proposals are a good one, and the proposal has Labour's full support. The Prime Minister said the deal was a decisive breakthrough.
And Mr. Speaker, it does what many said could not be done, removing thousands of pages of EU laws and making permanent, legally binding changes to the Protocol Treaty itself. That is the breakthrough we have made. Those are the changes we will deliver, and now is the time to move forward as one united kingdom. Yeah!
Well, Democratic Unionist Party member Ian Paisley said he hopes the deal can meet his party's expectations.
I think it's important that we do look at the legal issues which come forward, but I think it falls some way short in satisfying those tests. That's my gut instinct, and I want to be positive about it. I wanted to try and find somewhere that would allow us to see change.
In other news today, the energy regulator has reduced the cap on how much suppliers can charge customers, but bills are still expected to rise. Ofgem has announced the cap on the amount households pay for gas and electricity, and it'll drop by almost £1,000 from the 1st of April. However, customers are likely to pay 20% more on their annual bills, as the government's additional support only partially protects them. That means the average household will most likely pay £500 more a year than they did before. And half of all people in the UK have reported cutting back on food shopping in recent weeks as price rises take their toll on household budgets. An Office for National Statistics survey shows around a tenth of adults say they often or sometimes run out of food and can't afford to buy any more. 13% said they'd cut down on meal sizes because there wasn't enough money to put food on the table. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Dawn for Dan Wootton Tonight.
Hello, welcome back. Now, when we were kids, there were some words that got your mouths washed out with soapy water. Obviously, you can't do that now because today's little angels know their human rights and probably have the European Court of Justice on speed dial. But, hey, back in the day, it did the trick. Now, there are some words that make you want to wash your brain out with bleach at the moment. Rather than the F word, though, it's the B word. Yep, you've guessed it, Brexit. A word that has haunted us for 7 long years. A mythical oven-ready deal that made us all feel like we were the turkeys getting stuffed, ready for a good roasting. We were told that it was all about getting Brexit done. And now, drum roll please, it appears to have finally staggered over the line. EU chief Ursula von der Leyen flew into the UK for a televised love-in with Rishi Sunak, a cuppa with King Charles, and announced the Windsor Framework.
Now made a decisive breakthrough. Together, we have changed the original protocol and are today announcing the new Windsor Framework.
OK, so the Windsor Framework sounds more like a bad sitcom about Randy Andy, but let's not sweat the details, eh? Is everyone thrilled? No. But with rumours that Northern Ireland's DUP could back the pact, and even Brexit hardman Steve Baker quashed all those quitting rumours, this could be as good as it gets. But you can't please all the people all the time, can you? And nothing, repeat, nothing has ever been as divisive as Brexit. Ever since the referendum results were announced back in 2016, it just feels longer, the UK's ability to debate without hate has gone out the window. No matter what side you were on, even the very mention of the B word caused screeching hissy fits and often literal punch-ups. It's been a totally insane ride that I'm not sure any of us really ever saw coming. Families and friends found themselves falling out over something that really should have never caused such hateful hostility. It was a democratic referendum, and we were, once upon a time, a democracy. Now, everything that goes wrong from tomatoes upwards, or is that downwards, is blamed on Brexit. Never mind the world closed down for 2 years for a pandemic, or that there's a war in Europe. No, everything was all the fault of Brexit. Trying to bring reason into the equation and had a frothing at the mouth, bulging-eyed nutjob scream abuse in your face. Astonishing. Oh, and suddenly your very worth was decided on what and how many flags you had in your social media bio. The more, the madder. Now, please God, whatever God it is, we can move forward. The huge problem of Northern Ireland and its border with Ireland, therefore Europe, had to come before all the petty rivalries and political vanities, a problem which this evening Rishi assures us is solved.
We have delivered what the people of Northern Ireland asked for and the command paper promised. We have removed the border in the Irish Sea.
There will be plenty in the Tory party who perversely wanted Rishi to foul, which is weird because if the Conservatives are to have any hope of surviving, they have to show unity. Surely to most politicians and us exhausted plebs out here, the important thing is getting Brexit done. With so much else on our plates, tomatoes and cucumbers aside, obviously, surely it's better for everyone now just to work together and get on with it? Naive? Look, despite Ursula's twinkly-eyed podium double act with her new bestie Rishi, none of us should ever forget the European Union had behaved appallingly over us leaving their cosy little club. They behaved like a tantrum-throwing toddler and did everything to make us pay for daring to Brexit. Apparently today, all is well.
Two of us were honest with each other about the difficulties in our bilateral relationship. We knew we had to work hard with clear minds and determination, but we also both knew, dear Rishi, that we could do it.
The way she gazes at him is a bit weird, but we need to demonstrate true bulldog spirit here, show the rest of the world what we're made of and rise above all the pettiness that has gone before. The hideous stalemate of the past 7 years has caused genuine distress and hardship, especially to those in Northern Ireland who haven't even had a government for a year. We've already had one police officer shot as the horrors of sectarian violence in the Troubles rears its ugly head again. The Good Friday Agreement that brokered peace is 25 years old this year and cannot be broken now. My dad used to drive lorries around Northern Ireland back in the 70s, and I can vividly recall how close he came to the unimaginable happening. We can never, ever go back there. Like all deals, there is small print, 119 pages of it to be precise, that lawyers from all sides now have to digest. The dry face of documents, if you like, but so important. Shakespeare, see I'm clever here, wrote a play called The Merry Wives of Windsor. Let's hope this new Brexit framework gives us all a reason to be just as joyful. But, oh, this is a big but as well. I know this is going to get messy. To respond now, I'm not going to say superstar panel, right? Benjamin, no disrespect.
Why not?
But if you were Rod Stewart, you'd be a superstar. You're not, you're Benjamin Butterworth. So, honestly...
Well, that's not a good way to start, is it? Insulting them.
Right, so we have Madonna. We have
I'll take that. I'll have that.
Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter for the Iron newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and former MEP and political commentator, so she knows what she's talking about, Belinda de Lucy. OK, right, Belinda, I'm going to come to you first, actually, because you are the expert. You've lived this, you've been immersed in this. What do you make about what you've heard today?
I think the establishment has done a very good job at creating Brexit exhaustion for the majority of the population.
Yeah.
Well done them. They've got the people to the point where I think a lot out there are like, oh, if we have to sell off our sovereignty, then fine, so be it, let's just move on. Well done them. This is exactly how the Lisbon Treaty, the Maastricht Treaty, you name it, this is exactly how it happens. They make it such a painful process, a long, just drawn-out, horrendous process to leave the EU that they've got the people to the point where they're like, oh, for goodness sake, can we just not mention the B word anymore? But if I just replace the Brexit word with the UK making its own laws, this is what we are talking about. And unfortunately, listen, it's great that Rishi's speech was all like, you know, Alice in Wonderland, jam tarts and sprinkles. But the fact of the matter is, if the ECJ has a role in making law over UK territory, if it has its foot in the door, that door is going to be pushed further and further open. And what the deal means is that we have to trust Westminster again, our civil service, our Home Office, our Treasury, with saying no to the EU, vetoing EU law that's been rejected by Stormont. Do we trust Westminster? Brexit wasn't about just taking back control of the EU. It's about taking back control of our Parliament that had gone rogue while in the EU. I do not trust Westminster when it comes to saying no to EU and to rejecting EU law. And unfortunately, they've got their foot in the door now with this deal.
Benjamin, do you see anything positive positive from today at all?
I mean, look, you know, Brexit zealots like Belinda will never be happy. This will just go on and on complaining for them until we're just Little Britain. The truth is that, I mean, after, 7 years, as you said, of debate and argument and negotiation, finally the people of Northern Ireland might be able to get sausages again. That's the kind of practical thing...
Sausages were actually mentioned, weren't they?
Indeed, that's the kind of practical thing we're talking about for your average person in Northern Ireland. And for me, that shows the failure of Brexit as a concept.
What,
that
making our own laws?
That we have faced and wasted thousands upon thousands of hours, days even, of politicians' time to debate such basic things that we had before. This has been an incredibly expensive waste of time. And frankly, the fact that it took the King getting involved for right-wingers to think it looked good speaks volumes of the nonsense of the whole charade.
Carol, any positives from your side?
Well, everything he's just said is tosh. But
Feelings mutual.
You know how to charm him, don't you?
The bottom line here is I kept on wondering why. When I heard Ursula von der Leyen was coming, I thought, there's nothing good for us coming out of this, particularly if she's coming over here. And I was wondering why now, why they're doing it now, why they're giving concessions now, when they said right at the start of Brexit, when we voted to leave, that they would give no concessions, that they would not change the protocol at all, they would make no tweaks. And now suddenly they're making tweaks. And it's interesting. Well, let's go back to what Belinda was saying about the ECJ. This is a political court. This is a political court that reinforces EU dogma. It's not a proper court as we know it. There's zero democratic accountability with this court. It's
on a mission.
It is on a mission. This is the typical European institution that made us vote to leave the EU in the first place. It's precisely what we voted to escape. And 17.4 million people voted for us to become a fully sovereign nation. This deal, even with all its concessions, will not make us a fully sovereign nation.
You would have actually rather carried on where we were?
No.
Where did this end?
No,
Well,
didn't say that. But what I think is important, and Rishi said it today, he said, it was just something I just saw 2 minutes ago, he said, he spoke about the world changing and things being different. And there was just a little thing in my head where I thought, the way Britain behaved over Ukraine was magnificent. You know, we were the first people to move in there. And the thing is, the EU thought we were going to be just fall off the face of the earth. We were this piddling little nation that wasn't going to...
We were the defender of Europe while they sat...
Exactly. The world respected us for doing that. The world got involved. America got involved. The EU got involved after we did. We persuaded them to do the right thing. And I don't know whether something happened to them where they just thought, we need Britain. That, you know, I think...
You think it's that cynical?
I think it's that cynical. I think... And Rishi said it. He said the world is changing. And that's why we decided to come to this agreement right now. Maybe it is that. It has got to be self-interest with the EU. They're not doing it for us. They don't give a toss about Britain, but maybe they think they have to take Britain in... Well, we don't give a toss about them, particularly. Yeah, however, but they were holding us to ransom over Northern Ireland.
What I thought was one of the oddest criticisms of the EU after we left was that they were ruthless and self-interested in their motivations. Well, of course they would be. So would anybody once you've left the Green.
They were a bit childish.
But they did more than that, Ben.
Was one of the great
they tried to scupper us on almost every level.
In 2021...
Yeah, and that makes sense, because surely that was one of the great assets of being a part of the EU, that they could have such force in negotiations on a world stage.
Benjamin, don't you see how dodgy this is? It is almost unheard of in international laws that two parties agree to a treaty and only one of the parties gets their court to be the final arbiter of the treaty. This is unheard of. David Frost put forward a perfectly reasonable proposition to have an independent arbiter of the treaty. The EU said no because it wants its tentacles in our domestic affairs. Now, if the DUP suddenly agree to it and have...
Which we don't know. There's
which we don't know, then I will be more sympathetic because I'm not a professional on legal text. But it's when they used the King, dragged him into their political controversial deal... He
just had a cup of tea, come on.
No, it was the optics of it,
and I'm sorry, she's right. And also, the King should not be involved in politics. The Queen, had she still been alive, would never have got involved because that's not the monarchy's job. But he has made a stance by inviting her.
Unfortunately, we will keep talking about this all night. You're staying with me, you're not going anywhere, but we have to go to a break now. Yeah. Coming up, as Ricky Gervais piles into the Roald Dahl censorship debate with typical gusto, is literature being terrorised by cancel culture, or could we see the scrapping of so-called sensitivity readers? American author Lionel Shriver weighs in on that one later this hour. But up next in The Clash, and this one's fiery as well, after Cambridge University opened a postgraduate course for non-white students only, are these woke institutions discriminating against white working-class students? Social commentator Narinder Kaur, journalist and University of Cambridge Emma Webb, and charity founder Mark Brooks will battle it out next. Let us know what you think too. Email us at dan@gbnews.uk or tweet me using the handle @gbnews. There's also a poll up, and I really want to know what you think about this, so have a vote.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Time now for The Clash. In a bid to appear diverse, the University of Cambridge has tied itself in knots after banning white working-class students, racist, from applying to a postgraduate course to, quote, give opportunity for students from underrepresented groups. However, did you notice my sympathetic voice there? However, the university came a cropper after they were called out for racial discrimination and social engineering. And in a rapid U-turn, Cambridge is now allowing applicants to the course from a wider group defined by socio-economic factors rather than race. I mean, come on. Now, I find the proposed scheme rather ironic, given that white pupils are the least likely to go to university, according to the latest stats from the Department of Education. But what do you think? Are universities discriminating against white working-class students? Let me know your thoughts. Curious on this one by emailing dan@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. And while you're there, go vote in our poll. Go on, do me a favour. I'll bring you those results very shortly. But to debate this very, very fiery subject, I'm joined by reality TV star and social commentator Narinder Kaur, journalist and broadcaster, as well as ex-Cambridge University student Emma Webb, and co-founder of Men and Boys Coalition, Mark Brooks. Hello, lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Right, OK, Narinder, I'm going to start with you because you've got some very strong feelings on this one, haven't you? What do you think to this? Surely it is racist, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is. And that's because I think this whole narrative that ethnic minorities are somehow unfairly advantaged is a smokescreen. I think these elite universities have a history. They're historically renowned for not representing enough. So, no, I don't think it's racist. I do think it's classist. But I think in terms of representation, ethnic minorities are not represented in these universities enough at all, and they know that.
Your audio isn't too... Can you move closer to your mic a bit, maybe, next time? I mean, it's not often we can't hear you, Narinder.
Oh, no.
Emma, no, you actually went to Cambridge.
Can you hear me now?
Stop whispering. I can't hear you. So, Emma, you actually went to Cambridge University. So what do you think about what they were trying to do before they were called out on it?
Well, I was a white working class student at Cambridge. As soon as I saw this news, my blood absolutely boiled because I just think this is atrocious. There seems to be this assumption, and this is the result of the way that we think about groups in our society. We just clump people together on the basis of race with no acknowledgement for the differences within those groups, whether you're talking about the white British community or the black British community or anybody else. The assumption that white working class students are essentially equivalent as applicants to people who are coming from Eton and Harrow, I think is just awful. I had a good experience. I was very well supported by the university while I was there. So I have no complaints to my college or the university on those grounds. I think it's right that they did this U-turn. I think they've realised their mistake. Students should be given opportunities on the basis of merit and on the basis of need, and that should be it. There should be no discrimination on the basis of race whatsoever. This is not just classist, as Narinder was saying. This is racist because it's excluding disadvantaged students purely on the basis of their race. The only way in which you can say that that's not racism is if you take this balmy postmodernist definition of racism, which believes that racism is power plus privilege. That is not racism. It's discriminating on people against people on the basis of their skin colour alone, and that is exactly what this policy originally was. So I'm glad that they decided to do a U-turn.
So Narinder, skin colour surely shouldn't count in this at all. I mean, if someone is from an underprivileged background, their skin colour isn't important, surely.
Well, actually, in a report by the Daily Telegraph in 2021, the majority who applied for postgraduate schemes were majority white, regardless of their class. So they do need more ethnic minority representation. We can't always be underrepresented. However, we've got to remember that these elite universities have a history of classism and racism. Let's not use that as a smokescreen for the real problem, that these elite universities are actually just for the rich, middle-class white children.
Mark, I'd just like to bring you in on this. You represent the Men and Boys Coalition. What are your feelings about what Cambridge University tried to do, bearing in mind that, white working class boys, are faring the worst in our education system at all levels?
Well, absolutely. And, your figures that you already showed. I mean, if you look at white working class people in general, only about 1 in 5 white working class people go to university, but for other groups who are working class on free school meals, it's over half. So, the issue about the type of people going to university has changed from what it was 10 years ago, and that's a good thing. But we can't have a society where some people are more equal than others. And what you end up with, these unintended consequences, especially for working class boys, white working class boys and black working class boys as well, is that they end up thinking, well, there's no point in trying because there's barriers there that I can't change, that can't be changed. And you end up in this spiral where white working class boys just think there's no point even trying because the system is stacked against me. So the schemes like this just can't be acceptable. It's 21st century. We accept diversity. We want everyone to be equal and have equal opportunities. So any schemes like this actually do untold damage, and they're not fit for purpose in the 21st century.
Narinder, would you like to come back on that one?
Yes, I would. I mean, of course, no one should be disqualified coming from a working class background. However, this is how prejudice feels. So when you're an ethnic minority and working class, you're double stacked. The stacks against you double if you're a white working class boy, but if you're a black or brown working class boy, you are further disadvantaged. Do you understand that?
Emma, would you like? I mean, you've experienced the system. You are a working class girl, and you went to Cambridge.
Yeah, I mean, the statistics are very, very clear on this. The statistics on this are very clear. The most disadvantaged group when it comes to higher education in this country are white working class boys. And I'm sorry to say that Narinder misrepresented the statistics there, because whilst there is a larger number of applications from white background to postgraduate courses, actually they are ranked third in those that are actually successful. So this is just a misrepresentation of the statistics. And like I say, we know that in education, white working class boys are the most disadvantaged. So to try and make this, about race to the exclusion.
But that may not be a racism thing, Emma. That might be because of their work ethic. That may not be racism. We can't point that at racism. Racism, can we agree that these elite universities do favour middle-class white students as opposed to working class black, brown and white? They do favour.
Mark, I'm going to let you have the last answer on this because you're speaking for this group of people. What are your final thoughts on it?
Why is it so difficult to think about and treat everybody equally? That's where we should be in society. And when things like this come up, it shows that we've got a long way to go in terms of trying to reset some dial. You move it so far the other way, you end up discriminating against others. It's not fit for purpose. It's not what we're trying to create in our society today.
Thank you. I think it's a debate that will go on. And interestingly, I had a cabbie this morning who actually was talking about this subject, and he actually said that this country now is probably more classist than racist. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, the fact that we've moved on from it being more racist, but the fact that classism is still a huge issue. Right, thank you so much for that. That was reality TV star and social commentator Narinder Kaur, journalist and broadcaster Emma Webb, and co-founder of Men and Boys Coalition, Mark Brooks. Thank you all for joining me tonight. So, who do you agree with? Are universities discriminating against white working class students? Do you agree with my cab driver this morning that we are now probably more a classist country than a racist country? Right, a few of your comments coming in. Kat on Twitter says, yes, it is blatant discrimination. I mean, how can they get away with it? Reverse the colours in that, what they've done, and you'll see how racist it sounds. Meanwhile, Anne on Twitter says, universities need to attract people from a variety of backgrounds. If that means discrimination, then so be it. Meanwhile, Paul on Twitter says, it's not even up for debate. It's racism in plain sight. And your verdict is now in. Incredible. Actually, 94% of you agree that universities are discriminating against white working class students, while 6% of you say they are not. Right. Coming up, it gets better, as BBC Radio 2 legend Ken Bruce is forced out of his contract early despite 45 years of a glowing success on the station. Does the Beeb need to be investigated over ageism? Radio broadcaster, good friend to the channel, Liz Kershaw, is tonight's outsider, coming up soon. But first, as Ricky Gervais makes a mockery of the Roald Dahl censorship row, are the arts finally fighting back against cancel culture? American author Lionel Shriver weighs in on that one, coming up right next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, "Oh my God, what's she doing now?"
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. I hope you've got a nice cuppa with you, because we're going to talk about something you normally do when you've got a nice cuppa. Really good book, but you're watching me now, obviously. Now, publishing house Puffin sparked uproar last week with their plans to delete and even rewrite hundreds of sections of Roald Dahl's children's books, with several high-profile critics, including Salman Rushdie, who knows about cancel culture, and the Queen Consort Camilla, forcing a U-turn by the end of the week. But the censorship bug seems to be spreading, a bit like COVID, isn't it? With The Telegraph revealing Ian Fleming's James Bond books will now be edited and whacked with a legal disclaimer after woke sensitivity readers, how'd you even get that job, managed what Blofeld never did, to silence Britain's most famous spy. Another household name has now waded into the row, with a comedy legend Ricky Gervais asking his own unique and expletive style if his work would also be edited to protect the fragile and easily offended. A follow-up tweet suggested a change of heart, though. Yeah, right, of course it did. With Gervais jibing the "I've changed my mind, I think we should ban the words fat and ugly." No reason. Right, I'm delighted to talk through this one with a journalist and author of We Need to Talk About Kevin, Lionel Shriver. Hello, there you are. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, you know what you're doing? You write books, you read books. Lionel, what is going on? Is literature at risk of being ruined by this sensitivity, readers?
Well, publishers of all the entities in the world are doing a damn good job at trying to ruin our books and to ruin our fun as readers. I care as much about reading more, actually, than I do about writing. But what's been really great about this story is that it's completely blown up in Puffin's face. I have seen so many comments. It's not just the articles, but thousands of comments after the articles, deeply offended. And what is most mysterious about this impulse to revise classics and to and also to interfere with writers like me is that it seems to be top down. That is, the publishers are telling us what we should be touchy about and what we should be allowed to read. I don't get the impression that there are many parents, for example, writing into Puffin saying that little Jessica has been traumatized permanently because she encountered the word fat in a children's book, and would they please do something about it? But there is no on-the-ground movement to have these books changed and sanitized. It is all from the publishers.
This is the thing, Lionel. I haven't, talking to loads of people about this story, and I haven't come across anyone that's complained or been upset by it. And it just seems like woke virtue signalling on behalf of the publishers. It's like, just in case someone's upset, but nobody actually has been. I mean, it's very 1984 come to life, isn't it?
I'll tell you what, I actually, because I did a piece for Spiked online last week, and I did a précis of a sensitivity version of We Need to Talk About Kevin. And of course, Kevin isn't nasty and evil. Kevin is nice and good. And in the climactic scene, when in the original, Kevin kills his classmates and a teacher and a janitor with a crossbow. Instead, he throws everyone a party with pink cupcakes. It was a great opportunity for satire. But in preparation for doing that piece, I went through all of those hundreds of edits, which the Telegraph was very good about publishing, the complete list of changes. And it was woke on steroids. It was beyond insanity to insensibility. That is, not only did they eliminate fat and any reference to physical size, although for some reason it was okay to call someone enormous, but not fat.
Yeah, I was confused by that.
Where's the logic? And furthermore, you couldn't use most colors. You couldn't call anything white or black. You couldn't even call a tractor black. And less remarked on, they also eliminated the color red and brown. And I dare say that you couldn't use yellow either, because that's also a skin color. The only primary color remaining was blue. There were even two instances where they wouldn't let characters snap their fingers. Now, can you figure that out?
Not at all. Not at all. What effect do you think that the road we're going down with this rewriting literature is going to have on children, you know, the younger generation of readers?
Well, children like mischief. Children actually like badness.
Yeah, they love it.
They love it. They love children in books who misbehave and don't do what their parents tell them to. And if you force them to read about good little children all the time, who are very biddable and only talk about climate change and picking up litter, you're going to turn off kids to reading altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, you know, good children's book writers are, well, they're ultimately little kids themselves. And they love nastiness, and they love smelliness and ugliness and fat, and that's what, you know, Roald Dahl understood.
Yeah, you've only got to think of how popular things like horrible histories are, where there's all sorts of blood and guts and beheadings and people being nasty to one another, and we're worried about having tractors that happen to be black. It's insane. And, you know, just one final question. I mean, the Bible wasn't exactly the easiest read in the world. I mean, are they going to come for that one next, do you think?
Oh, yeah, there would be nothing left in the Bible.
No, you're right, absolutely. And James Bond, well,
what would happen to Jesus? He'd get a pink cupcake.
Yeah, I mean, but he was probably quite in touch with climate change and stuff, so... But thank you so much for joining us tonight, Lionel. That is great for getting your comments across. And, yeah, it's very worrying, isn't it? So thank you very much for joining us. Right, coming up... So, Rishi Sunak has today struck his new deal over the Northern Ireland Protocol. But amid accusations that Sunak is selling off our sovereignty, would Boris Johnson have made a better job of protecting the Union? That's the big debate with my panel at 10 o'clock. Also, as BBC Radio 2 legend Ken Bruce is forced out of his contract early, despite a glittering 45-year career on the station, does the Beeb need to be investigated over ageism? Former BBC radio broadcaster Liz Kershaw, who was also retired early by the Beeb, gives her opinion right next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. Time now for The Outsider. Now, veteran Radio 2 presenter Ken Bruce has hit out at the BBC, accusing his former employer of pushing him out of his contract early despite his 31-year presenting stint. Ken joins a growing list of veteran broadcasters seemingly shunted aside by the corporation, including Vanessa Feltz after 19 years, Paul O'Grady after 14, Simon Mayo axed after 40, and Steve Wright after 23 years. All of this has only heightened the impression the BB's on a purge against older white presenters. Who'd have thought? Joining me now is a veteran broadcaster. I love that phrase for us older people. Liz Kershaw. Liz, thank you so much for joining us. Another veteran. Hello, fellow veteran. Right, is the BBC ageist? Does it need to be investigated for the way it's treating people?
Well, I've been waiting for the evidence to pile up because we all thought that. But I think there's a really clear-cut case now to show that, yes, because we've had Steve Wright, Ken Bruce, Paul O'Grady, Vanessa Feltz, all replaced by people. One is in his 30s, Owen Jones, who's replacing Vanessa, who was 60 when they sacked her, and the others are all in their 40s, younger white men in their 40s. So there's it's in plain sight now. And somebody's always said to me, "Oh, Liz, you're our shop steward," and I'm thinking maybe it's time now that I organised a class action on the principle of it. It happened to me as well a year ago, and I couldn't prove it, but I think it's just a case of numbers now.
Yeah, evidence is building up. And what effect has it had on you, Liz, actually? I mean, you've got a naturally brilliant, bubbly personality, but it's going to affect you, isn't it?
It didn't, because two reasons, really. I saw it coming, because you can feel it in the air. As Vanessa said, she could sense the ageism/sexism, and I could feel it coming. And I'd slogged my way in and out of the BBC all through COVID, driving down because you couldn't go on a train, temperature checks, tests up your nose before you could go into the studio. And I did that week in, week out. I knew I'd done a good job because the public needed the company, and I just felt it. And I had a year to get used to it, because I was told a year, and I had to carry on for another year. And it's just such a changed place. It was kind of relief. And my producer once said, "Oh, you'll never retire, Kershaw. You'll die with your headphones on." So in the way, it did me a favour because it forced it.
Yeah.
And I've always had this maxim in my head that somebody said to me when I first started on radio in 1987. Always remember, Liz, it's not who you are, it's just what you do. So I value the things in my life, like my home, my family, my wonderful friends, the birds singing, going on holidays. I did put in place my finances to prepare for that day, so that's not a worry. And I've got myself a hobby on GB News, which I absolutely love, because I like
Obviously, we're veterans. Hello, veterans are welcome. I know you were joking earlier on about being the shop steward for the people that have left the BBC, you know, all weirdly older and whiter. I mean, is there actually, seriously, any consideration that you will be getting together as a group and doing something to fight back against this?
Well, not yet, because I would be the one to instigate it, and I haven't organised it yet. I mean, I've been to the Common Select Committees in the past and had questions asked in Parliament about the way the BBC treats its presenters, and I've managed to bring about change in the past. So I've got a track record. I'm not, and it's even easier now because I've nothing to be afraid of at all. But I think I'm really admiring Ken Bruce for that tweet he put out last week, because what happens is they call you in quietly and it's divide and rule, and they tell you that your day is up, and everybody else is queuing up to take your job in a way. So you're really on your own, and the BBC tries to force you to cooperate by putting out a statement saying, oh, I've decided, you know, to move on. I've got so many more opportunities. When they asked me to do that, I said, no, I'm not doing it because it's not the truth. I'm not volunteering to leave. So I'm really glad Ken put that out. So I'm really glad that Vanessa spoke. And what they've done to Ken Bruce is so disgusting and so disrespectful and insensitive. I'm glad it's coming to the open. And the BBC can do this because presenters are not staff. You cannot sack in UK employment law somebody for reaching 60 or 65. If you want somebody to get rid of somebody, you have to make a case. You have to give them final warnings and prove that they're incompetent. You can't just say, oh, you're a bit old, out. But no presenters are staff with any such rights. And the BBC went against the government. The government, a few years ago, was trying to make people who went in day out to the BBC and only really worked for the BBC on staff for tax reasons. And the BBC fought against that because they want the flexibility to be able to change the goods in the shop window as though people are cans of beans. I'm not saying that the schedule should not be refreshed, else we'd still have the same people, you know, we've had on for 40 years. And you want young people to come in and have opportunities that I had. I only got on Radio 1 because somebody else had got the boot. So, you know, I'm not being a hypocrite about that. It's the way it's done, and it's why it's done. It's not done because people are failing in their roles. Ken Bruce, massive audience, and Steve Wright. It's done at the will of management.
Liz, sorry, lovely. I'm going to have to cancel you as well. But not because you're a veteran. I get that. Don't worry. Thank you so much for joining. That was legendary broadcaster Liz Kershaw. Thanks so much for joining us. Responding to Ken Bruce's early exit from the BBC, a spokesman said Ken decided to leave Radio 2 and it is always known he's leaving in March, returning to Wogan House for a week after a month of broadcasting. Ken has made a vow. We wish Ken all the best for the future. But next, key issues of concern over Rishi's Northern Ireland deal. Yes, we're back to Brexit. Don't go too far.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 o'clock. I'm Dawn Neeson. Tonight, in a potential watershed moment for the UK, Rishi Sunak has today struck a new deal over the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Now made a decisive breakthrough. Together, we have changed the original protocol and are today announcing the new Windsor Framework.
Catchy, Windsor Framework. But amid accusations that Sunak is selling off our sovereignty, would Boris Johnson have done a better job of protecting the union? That's the big debate with my panel coming up next. And tonight I'm joined by Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda Zalusi, and gosh, have they got a lot to say. Also coming up, the shocking story of Ernesto Elliott, the Jamaican criminal who had his deportation blocked by woke celebs and a host of Labour MPs. Then, just 6 months later, he engaged in an 8-minute street brawl where he would murder in cold blood. Unbelievable, isn't it? Fleet Street icon Kelvin MacKenzie reacts to this, a chilling chain of events, as he hits out to the lefty do-gooders and demands that the UK gets tougher on foreign criminals. Don't miss that in Uncancelled. Plus, as the government's terror law reviewer says, he supports the return of Shamima Begum and other women who joined the Islamic State. Should the ISIS bride stand trial in the UK? Another hot debate for you. That's in our media buzz coming up soon. And as Buckingham Palace prepares to announce that Camilla would be known as Queen rather than Queen Consort after the coronation, is this in line with what the wishes of the late Elizabeth wanted? Camilla's biographer, Angela Levin, delivers her expert insight on this constitutional conundrum coming up shortly. And Betty Boothroyd, the first female Speaker of the House, has sadly died aged 93.
There is no point in waiting for silence. The honourable gentleman is going to get silence. Produce your voice, Mr. Hill.
What an amazing woman. We pay tribute to the political trailblazer in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. The first front pages will arrive in mere moments, and right after, Polly Middlehurst with the latest news.
Dawn, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the Prime Minister has tonight been addressing the House of Commons, saying the new Brexit trade deal for Northern Ireland means businesses and people can now chart a new way forward. Rishi Sunak saying the Windsor Framework, as it's known, will deliver smooth-flowing free trade across the UK while protecting Northern Ireland's sovereignty. This includes the Northern Ireland Assembly being able to stop some EU laws affecting the flow of goods, which he has called the Stormont Break. Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed the new deal, adding the Red and Green Lane proposal is a good one and has Labour's full support. The Prime Minister said earlier the deal was an incisive breakthrough.
And Mr. Speaker, it does what many said could not be done, removing thousands of pages of EU laws and making permanent, legally binding changes to the Protocol Treaty itself. That is the breakthrough we have made. Those are the changes we will deliver, and now is the time to move forward as one united kingdom.
Well, the Democratic Unionist Party member Ian Paisley says he hopes the deal can meet his party's expectations.
I think it's important that we do look at the legal issues which come forward, but I think it falls some way short in satisfying those tests. That's my gut instinct, and I want to be positive about it. I want it to try and find somewhere that would allow us to see change.
And in other news today, the energy regulator has reduced the cap on how much suppliers can charge customers, but bills are still expected to rise. Ofgem has announced the cap on the amount households pay for gas and electricity will drop by almost £1,000 from the 1st of April. However, customers are likely to pay 20% more on their annual bills, as the government's additional support only partially protects them. That means the average households will most likely pay £500 more every year than they did before. Now, the northern lights that were seen across the UK on Sunday evening have been appearing once again tonight. Members of the public have been capturing the lights in Scotland, North Wales, Cambridgeshire, Shropshire and even as far south as Essex. But there was also a rare sighting in southern England as the aurora lights reached Kent and, believe it or not, as far as Cornwall. Wish I'd seen them. OK, I'm back in an hour with more news. Back to Dawn.
Thank you, Polly. Right, welcome back. Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. Right, OK. This is really, actually, I've got a Dalek in my ear. Forgive me for this one. Right, OK, but the papers are in. Right, the Metro, you can put the oven on, reference to the oven-ready deal. It's only taken 7 years. It might be a bit barbecued by now. The Daily Star, we have Mexico Prez with caught an elf. Me, no idea either, but I'm guessing, and there's a picture of a pig on there as well. Anyway, and finally, the Eye we have in as well, which is Sunak secures a breakthrough on Brexit as tensions loom. Well, there's always going to be tension. I actually think I prefer the elf story, to be honest with you. 7 years of oven. 7 years of oven-ready deals. Right, my panel are back with me, a Daily Express columnist, Carol Malone, senior reporter for the Eye newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, and former MEP and political commentator, Belinda de Lucy. Now, it's been a long time coming, hasn't it? But Rishi Sunak's finally sealed, they're looking at me already, finally sealed a deal with the EU on the Northern Ireland Protocol. According to some Tory MPs, the deal that's good, it will, quote, finish off Boris for good. He will have nowhere to go. Here's EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen hinting this afternoon that previous attempts to negotiate with Boris Johnson proved problematic.
Also remember how the two of us were honest with each other about the difficulties in our bilateral relationship. And it was vital to put that on the right footing too.
She keeps gazing at me in that weird way. Of course, the devil will be in the detail, but critics already fear Sunak's deal could ultimately prove a Brexit betrayal. And the move from number 10 to use King Charles as a political pawn by meeting von der Leyen today is a lame attempt at giving the agreement a faux royal approval. Or is it? Meanwhile, a rising Tory star, Kemi Badenoch, a sweetheart of the party right, has been outed as one of Boris' backstabbers who brought down the former PM in a so-called undemocratic coup. In a series of damning WhatsApp exchanges, Badenoch appeared to pressure a junior colleague into resigning just hours after she herself had quit during the collapse of Boris's government. So, even though he appears to have finally got Brexit over the line, are the knives still out for Rishi? And with the likes of Badenoch being exposed for helping to bring down a PM who was incredibly popular with the voters, let's be honest, do we need Boris Johnson back to make sure Brexit is genuine and honest? Or is he toast? Now, you're all staring at me in that, oh my God, right, you're all staring at that in that way. Now, so, Boris Johnson, Carol, if we had Boris Johnson back now, would you have more faith in what's going on with Brexit?
I don't even know why we're talking about Boris coming back. He's not coming back. There's no way on God's earth he's coming back. I mean, I know that...
Have you told him that? He doesn't appear to realise it.
Well, of course he does. What has he done recently to show he wants to come back? He hasn't done or said anything. And he certainly hasn't said anything today about this deal. It's interesting that he hasn't said anything as yet. He's keeping his powder dry, I think, like a lot of people, and waiting to see what happens. But you know, we keep on being asked, can he come back? No, he's not going to come back. There isn't the appetite to have him back. You know, there are probably a handful of people who think it might be a good idea, but, you know, he's not going to get Brexit over the line. I mean, you can tell Ursula von der Leyen there was talking about not being able to deal with him. But I just don't know why we keep on talking about him coming back. It just seems bizarre.
The front page of the Eye tonight, Carol, was saying Boris Johnson weighs up public intervention.
Well, of course, a public intervention doesn't mean coming back as PM. What it means is what he's going to say about this deal. And he's got to be careful what he says, because if he condemns it, people will say he's being petty and bitter and stupid. If he agrees with it and it goes wrong, well, he's going to get blamed for that as well. I don't know.
I mean, maybe like the principle he took before the EU referendum, he'll just write 2 versions of the speech and then see which one he thinks makes him more popular. I mean, I think trying to simplify all of this Brexit stuff, I'm reminded of a quote by the late Betty Boothroyd, who said that people who think the EU question is black and white are either charlatans or simpletons, which brings me to Boris Johnson. A comment she made in the House of Lords, deriding Boris Johnson and deriding the mess that is Brexit. And I think, you know, the truth is that I don't think Boris Johnson is trying to come back as Prime Minister.
Think he is.
And the best indication of that is his comments on Ukraine, where he said they should be able to join NATO and they should be able to join the EU. Now, those are not comments that speak of someone who is expecting to be Prime Minister in the next sort of 18 months while the Tories are still in government. So I don't think that's going to happen. But really, Kemi has let the cat out of the bag in this, and that's the central question you started with. Well, I don't think you'll say yes in a minute, but because here is someone...
You never say yes to him, stop.
Here is someone who worked with Boris Johnson, who was on his side politically within the party in terms of agreeing with Brexit, and she didn't want him to be Prime Minister and move to have him removed because she knew that Boris Johnson was a hopeless charlatan and simpleton.
There's a very good reason. I thought Kemi Badenoch was a bit different from the rest. I thought she wasn't self-interested and self-serving. The reason she didn't want Johnson there, she saw what was happening to him and she wanted shut of him because there were so many people in her ear saying she could do it, she was brilliant, she's a star of the future. Do you remember the fuss around her at the time? And she
it was by you.
She was
people like you.
It wasn't about people like me because I thought she was different. I thought she was good. And all of a sudden she sees that he's weak, he's on the back foot, so she starts almost bullying her inferiors, people below her at work, encouraging them on a WhatsApp to resign because she had. I think that's really disloyal, it's disingenuous, and it shows how self-serving she actually is. She's no different from the rest.
Belinda, you were a big fan of Kemi's, weren't you?
Oh, my gosh, I championed her to the end. I thought, as Carol said, I thought she was a breath of fresh air and she had the courage of her conviction. I was really impressed with her response to the critical race theory being taught in schools, because I had lots of issues with that with my girls in one school in particular, where I actually sent the headmistress Kemi Badenoch's speech in Parliament where she said CRT should not be taught unchallenged in schools. I thought she was fantastic. And then it was reported she was talking about having Brexit fatigue, and that slightly got me worried because that's where, obviously...
This is your thing,
yeah,
isn't it?
It's the exhaustion is the best friend to the EU. And now, of course, we've got this. And as Carol said, it wasn't that she just stabbed Boris in the back, is that she enthusiastically encouraged and put pressure on other ministers and juniors.
And she was blocking them, Belinda, from her WhatsApp, the ones that wouldn't resign. She was blocking them so that they couldn't be part of the conversation.
And it's what people are fed up with politicians, is the two-facedness of it. She clearly wanted to keep her nose clean and appear to the public that she was this new breath of fresh air. And what's been very disappointing, because I willed her so well,
me too.
is that she seems to be very much part of the Rishi Hunt blob job, which she must have known would have been soft on the EU, high taxes, delaying EU law. She must have known that would have been the result of getting rid of Boris.
Are you still a fan of Boris, by the way?
No, I'm highly critical of Boris, and I don't think he was this big Mr. Brexit champion defender, but I do think because his name was tied to Brexit and because of his ego, he would have fought much harder to keep the EU out of UK territory, whereas Rishi, keeps the door open for them. So in that way, I would have...
He wouldn't have agreed to this.
Yeah, Boris would not have agreed to this at all. He had the Northern Ireland Protocol bill that Rishi is going to scrap, believe you me.
And why didn't we
bill's ridiculous.
I mean, look, the truth is all you show is that nothing is ever good enough for people who want ultimate purity.
Not ultimate purity.
The country is sick of people like Belinda and their obsession over extreme Brexit, and they want some pragmatism, and they want to get the economy back on the track, and they want to get on with their lives, not Brexit.
It was a democratic vote.
It's you guys that have been elongating.
And then we elected a government, and I'm sorry, but if anything shows how hopeless Boris Johnson was, it's the fact that he was Mr Brexit, elected with an 80-seat majority, and still he got a useless deal.
Forced
it
Boris
wasn't oven-ready, it was mouldy Brexit.
But Benjamin, one final word. Would you go back into the EU if we had the opportunity?
I mean, I think it's a pointless debate, because I certainly wouldn't be advocating for it, but if you gave me a vote, yes.
Yes, you would. Interesting.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it's all about.
So would most people in this country, according to polls.
No, they wouldn't.
Yes, they would. There was a poll last week that found just 3 constituencies had a majority of people wanting to stay out.
We have to leave it there now. Gosh, you three.
It's getting going.
Right, coming up in the media buzz, do you agree with the Daily Mail's Peter Hitchens that Shamima Begum, oh God, deserves to be brought back to the UK to face trial? My panel, them again, thrash this one out along with more of tomorrow's front pages coming very soon. And next, with reports that consort will be dropped from Queen Camilla's title after the coronation, are the monarchy disrespecting the wishes of the late Queen Elizabeth? Distinguished royal biographer Angela Levin gives her thoughts after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone.
My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. The journey of Camilla, Queen Consort, through the Crown Court of Public Opinion has rarely run smoothly. Of course, when she married into the royal family back in 2005, that long ago now, many believed she would never be called Queen. But after nearly 2 decades of dedicated service, public opinion has shifted, with the late Queen Elizabeth making it clear shortly before her death that she wanted Camilla to be known as Queen Consort. But now Buckingham Palace are set to go further, with royal sources briefing the Mail online that Consort is due to be dropped after May's coronation. So, with Camilla due to be known just as Queen, is this a reward for her persistence and loyalty to the firm? Or do we risk disrespecting the wishes of the late Queen Elizabeth? To give her very expert opinion, I'm thrilled to say now that I'm joined by Camilla's biographer, the wonderful Angela Levin. Angela, what do you make of this? Is this disrespecting the Queen, or...?
No, not at all, not at all. It's all worked out very carefully. When she married Charles, the palace was sure that she would never be queen, never be accepted. So they put on their website that she would be princess consort. See, so decades later, it was a nonsense, because if you are somebody who marries a king, you're automatically queen.
So why did the Queen, the late Queen, say Queen Consort rather than just Queen?
Oh, because that's what happens to all the monarchs' wives or husbands.
Right.
The Duke of Edinburgh was also a consort. Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was a consort. Queen Mary was a consort, but they just didn't use them.
Right.
But they began using the Queen Consort because they wanted, actually, I think, to demean her a little bit. She's not as good as all the other wives, so we keep this so it's not absolutely entirely Queen Consort. But that's a nonsense. I mean, I've been calling her Queen once she became a Queen.
I must admit, I automatically have as well, because it's like, it's...
They were just worried, what they're worried about, and it's sort of, if you've got this recurring feeling that people are going to throw things at you, not going to like you, there's going to be riots, but actually it's gone extremely smoothly. They were incredibly moved, the King and the new Queen, when they came back from the funeral to Buckingham Palace. They thought there might be nobody there or people there who would be shouting at them, but people were singing God Save the King and clapping and being very nice. And so they've seen in a few weeks that any antipathy has gone lower and lower and lower, so they could now announce it that we're Queen. But they would do it anyway. I mean, it's just they're being over-careful in the palace.
So there's no disrespect to the Queen, or...?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, the Queen said this on the first day of her Jubilee year, a Platinum Jubilee year, because she was a very clever woman and she wanted to tidy up the fact of what she will be. Everyone is a consort attached to the title, but they wanted that to show that there wouldn't be arguments in Parliament, that there wouldn't be people saying she didn't really like her because she didn't speak to her for 10 years. And someone else would say, yes, she did, because she did. And it could have been blow up and very, very difficult. By saying that, people actually respected her and don't want to change what she wanted. So it's just an unnecessary... It's like a Mrs. or a Mr.
Right, so it's
just come off.
But I did notice you put this on Twitter, didn't you, on social media, and you got quite a few comments about Camilla that, I must admit, surprised me. Quite vitriolic about her.
There's people who really like her or who've seen how hard she's worked and her sense of duty and doing things like domestic violence, which nobody in the royal family would go through. And she's done a great deal of work there. And other people who still feel that she helped kill Diana. I mean, it is a nonsense. Diana didn't have a seatbelt and her driver was had alcohol and drugs, but they still feel that. And there's also a small group of very religious Christians who feel that she didn't have the proper marriage because it was done, you know, twice. She had the religious prayers in Windsor after she got married.
Right.
And they still feel like that. And they can just blow up. They've got enormous...
they're quite feisty about it. How do you think William and Harry would be taking all this fuss about Queen Consort?
Well, I think William gets on very well. Camilla was wonderful with Catherine because she had such a hard time when she joined the royal family. She helped her, she took her out for lunch, she showed her what the protocols were, some which you can skip, some which you have to do, and they get on very well. And Catherine often goes out with Camilla and Charles to see art and things like that, which William is not so interested in. But I think he likes that he's so nice to her. And she doesn't push her away, she doesn't try and be a grandmother to their children.
No,
She's just there if they want her. And I think that works very well. And I think Harry is rushing around, hitting everybody and very unhappy, taking it all out on them because nothing is ever his fault. And I think that's the problem. She was always very nice to him. She tried to show him what life might be like outside if he wanted to go and all that. But, you know, he's not been grateful for anything.
He's got a very short memory. And I have to, because everyone on this show tonight has to talk about the B word at some point. You're not allowed out of the studio unless you talk about the B word. So, Angela, B word it is. Charles had a nice cup of tea with Ursula von der Leyen today, didn't he?
Yes.
What do you make of that? Is he being used as a political pawn, or was it just it's something that, you know, she's sort of head of state, if you like, almost?
I thought it was rather inappropriate because I think you have to do it after everything's signed and absolutely worked through. I thought it was in advance and it shouldn't have been done. But he has to do a lot of what the government tells him. It doesn't have to be just his view. It wasn't him pushing himself and doing what he did years ago and getting involved in politics a bit. I think that was... Rishi needed that to sort of be triumphant. And I'm sorry about that because I think it was a mistake.
So you think Charles would not have done that unless Rishi had put the pressure on him to do so?
Well, I don't know exactly, but I think that's the feeling I get, that he's been used, and also calling it Windsor.
Yes, what do you make of that?
I think that's...
I mean, I know it was in Windsor, that's why it's called Windsor.
Yes, but I think it's inappropriate because I think that brings the king into it in a way that's completely unnecessary.
Do you think that's done on purpose? A little bit of like an emotional blackmail thing?
Yes, I do, actually. I do.
Yeah.
I think it's very poor show. I don't think he's a very poor show. He's our king and he does well. And he can actually talk to people in a light-hearted way. He doesn't have to go and talk about all the things that they've been discussing. But I do think that it was wrong to use him to make Rishi look good.
Would the late Queen have done that, do you think? Had tea with Ursula?
I don't know. You never know. I don't know. I can't say about that.
Go on, have a guess. Go on. You're the expert on this.
Well, I think she might have done, to be polite. I mean, she'll do these things and she'll speak... She won't get into the depths of it, you know. How are you? Have you come far? She's very good at that sort of small talk. She wouldn't have pushed her own views ahead of everybody else. And I don't think King Charles would have done either. I think it's just the wrong timing.
Yeah, it doesn't look good, does it? And as
No.
you say, the whole Windsor framework, I mean,
Yes.
A, it's not sexy, but I mean, it's also that, like, link to the royals.
I think you're just getting more and more people thinking, oh, well done, and it's all connected with the royals and they're interested, and so we should do it too. And I think that's the wrong way to go. But that's just my own opinion.
I wonder if he does support Brexit. Charles?
I don't know. Haven't
Go
asked
on.
him.
What would you put your money on?
Well, I just think he cares about this country and the Commonwealth. And I don't think he would interfere with that. I don't think he would do that.
Interesting. Been good to be a fly on the wall, wouldn't it? Thank you very much, Angela. That was a royal biographer, Angela Levin. Thank you very much for joining us. Right, coming up in Uncancelled. After a convicted Jamaican knifeman avoided deportation before going on to murder on the streets of Britain, do we need to clamp down on foreign criminals? Fleet Street icon and former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie, weighs in soon. But next in the media buzz, is the Daily Mail's Peter Hitchens right to say Shamima Begum should be brought back to the UK to face a trial? Or is that too much of a risk? Today's superstar panel, tackle this, plus more of tomorrow's front pages right after this break. Don't go too far.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. More front pages first. More front pages first, though. Hot off the press, as it were. Right, so here's how the Daily Mail responds to today's events. So many thought it couldn't be done, but as the Prime Minister held a historic Ulster deal with the EU, And threat of a Tory rebellion appears to melt away. Has Rishi done the impossible? That's a lot of words on that page, isn't there? Right, the Telegraph, that leads on Sunak's claims that his Brexit deal is a new way forward for Britain, even quoting a friend of this channel, the new Deputy Tory Party Chairman, Lee Anderson, who reckons the PM has, quote, nailed it. The Mirror, they were quite positive, weren't they? The Mirror, OK, the Mirror have gone completely off their own tangent here. The Daily Mirror's exclusive reveals the final resting place of evil Yorkshire Ripper Peter Sutcliffe, with his niece revealing his ashes have been scattered close to the coast of Arnside in Cumbria. Wow, OK, well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Don't know what to make of that, really, to be honest with you. Right, more on the media buzz now, though, with tonight's panel, who are back, and they're still talking to each other, and even better, me, which is useful. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter for the I newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and former MEP and political commentator Belinda Lucy. Now, following last week's decision to bar Shamima Begum from returning to the UK, the government's terrorism watchdog is calling for the ISIS sympathisers' return. In a speech at King's College in London, Jonathan Hall KC is expected to argue that banning Begum from returning could see Britain falling out of step with allies such as the US, who have accepted the return of ISIS women and their children, while also raising the risk of possible exploitation by the former Brit by extremists in Syrian camps, a fear shared by Mail Online columnist Peter Hitchens. In his latest column, Hitchens argues that by depriving Begum of a trial in Britain, she could slip back into the UK on a migrant boat. While some think Begum's decision to join the death cult was the idiotic decision of a 15-year-old, don't forget it was the same Shamima, unrepentant, who said this.
I don't regret it because it's changed me as a person. It's made me stronger, tougher.
In the Manchester Arena, you must have heard about that attack. What did you think about that?
It's a two-way thing, really, because women and children are being killed back in the Islamic State right now. I saw a beheaded head in the bin.
In the bins?
Yeah, through the bin.
What was that like when you first saw that? These are the heads of captives?
Yeah, didn't faze me at all.
Well, you can't believe some of that, can you? Right, OK, so superstar panel. See your superstars now. Actually, should come back. So, do you agree with what Peter Hitchens has written on this, Carol?
You know what? I have enormous respect for Peter Hitchens, but I think he's so wrong on this. You know, he talks about her being deprived of her citizenship as mob justice. He says it's the cancellation of her citizenship reminds him of the thuggish Soviet Union, despotic. This is tosh. Her citizenship was cancelled on the basis of intelligence that the then Home Secretary Sajid Javid saw, and he read that intelligence report. And he said at the time, if you knew what I knew...
That was quite chilling, wasn't it? Yes.
You would never let her back in. So it's tough. But to also say that she should be on trial in this country, it has been said time and time again, not just by the security service. They said it's really hard to build a case against somebody, to get evidence over here. Whitehall officials have already said prosecutions would be virtually impossible. The police have said they couldn't prosecute here because the gathering of evidence now is impossible. What are they going to gather? The only evidence that we have against her is an intelligence report, and we can't use that evidence. So, you know, when you have all your security services, that Neil Basu, who's the former head of the terrorism organisation in this country, he said bringing someone like her back is a massive risk to our national security. Various security organisations... I can't speak. Organisations in this country have said the same. Now, why employ security services who tell you not to bring someone back because they are securities? Why are we not listening? Why are we trying to get her back here? Because she will not be tried in this country. She will be allowed to walk free. She'll be taken care of by the state, where she will have to have 24-hour surveillance here by security team. Now, that is going to cost a fortune. It's just not worth it.
And Benjamin, we don't have a good record of monitoring terrorists on our streets, do we? I mean, so many attacks have been carried out by people that were supposedly being monitored by our security service. So if Shamima does come back, She's going to be a huge risk to us all, surely.
I mean, any attack getting through is obviously a disaster, but, you know, an awful lot of attacks are foiled, and I think we have an excellent intelligence service in MI5. I think it's unlikely that Shamima Begum is likely to be coming across on an inflatable dinghy, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I suspect she's under quite, you know, close monitoring, even from the Al-Roj prison camp where she lives in northern Syria. But the truth is that Peter Hitchens in the Mail on Sunday is right, just like James Whale in the Daily Express today, hardly members of the wokerati. These people are laying down the basis of Western British justice systems, that you are innocent until you're tried, and that, you know, I would obviously want her to be found guilty based on what we know about her.
What evidence? What evidence?
Well, thanks to the BBC, she admitted to being a member of a terrorist group. Now, that's pretty damning evidence that would get her locked up.
Anyway. We knew
I was going to say, that wasn't exactly...
Your whole argument was that you couldn't prove it. Well, she said it on tape now in the BBC documentary.
The fact she will say, and one of the things that they said that if she came back here, she would say that she was trafficked. That's what the cops have said, that women coming back here would say they were trafficked over then to get there. And that's exactly what the defence her lawyers were putting forward. There is no evidence that we can present. We know she was a member of a terror group. We know she was a member of the morality police there. We know, from what we've been told, that she sewed people into suicide jackets. That might not be considered a crime.
I wish people would just be honest. When they champion Begum coming back to the UK, they know full well she won't face justice. They know this. They know full well that the Yazidi victims of these death cult collaborators like Begum will never see justice served. I'd like them to look in the eye of those Yazidi victims and tell them, oh, she'll come back and we'll take care of her and we'll welcome her with open arms. She'll barely get a slap on the wrist. Not one of the 400 British ISIS fighters should have come back to this country without serving a sentence in Syria for the crimes they committed on foreign soil.
But she is going to be tried in Syria by their government justice system, and they do have a real court system that operates with some modicum of
So what's wrong with her having a trial out there then?
Well, that would also be fine. But the point is, and you know, you spent the rest of the programme talking about British democracy and British justice. Whether it is someone as evil as Begum or Peter Sutcliffe, mentioned on one of the other front pages, you are innocent until you're tried, and you should be tried, and you should go to prison. That is how our system works. Not because they are acceptable, but because that is justice.
No. When the security services have said there is no chance of gathering information, when the cops have said there is no chance of gathering information, hell, they can't even gather evidence on criminals in this country, let alone something that happened 4 years ago.
Do you really think
in Syria?
Shamima Begum is so unbelievably clever that she can outwit the intelligence services of this country?
What evidence are they going to bring back?
I've got a feeling you put her in a police station in London and quiz her. She doesn't exactly show any signs that
but she's been deemed a threat to national security, Benjamin. So we have an option. Finally, as an island, we can filter out people who mean us harm.
Yes.
She's been deemed to mean us harm, and you still want her back, even though by law she doesn't have to come back because she has dual citizenship.
I don't want her back as such. It's her right. That is how citizenship works.
There will be no justice here, and you know
so
she won't
if you do
face
something terrible,
here.
should we be allowed to deport you?
Well,
No, I should
serve.
Well, it is, because she's as British as Belinda.
She didn't join an ISIS death cult for a start.
Well, actually, not that she's told us. I mean, we don't know, actually.
You just don't think. I think people who commit crimes on foreign territory should be absolutely sentenced there, and she should be in a desert hole for the rest of her life.
In that case, Belinda, should a terrorist born in another country with their citizenship who comes here, does something terrible, should that country be able to refuse her back and leave that person here?
If that person has committed crimes on this soil, and we have evidence, we should put them in jail here. But she didn't commit her crimes on UK soil.
You believe, for example, that a Dutch terrorist who comes here, we should fund them for the rest of their lives.
God, we fund everyone else. No, if they've committed crimes here,
it's a nonsense argument. It doesn't add up at all.
I don't know why you
it undermines us on the global
Yours
stage.
is a nonsense argument because there is no evidence to be had on Shamima.
And your obsession with pleasing the global stage gets us into all sorts of pickles. We should stop adhering.
It's called international law and justice. Try
we have to leave it there. Golly gosh, honestly, this is feisty, isn't it? Right, coming up, we look back at the trailblazing political career of Betty Boothroyd.
There is no point in waiting for silence. The honourable gentleman is going to get silent. Produce your voice, Mr. Hill!
More of that wonderful lady when I crown today's Greatest Britain and the Union Jackass. Next in, uncancelled, with the British police seemingly ignoring the growing epidemic of low-level crime, and a convicted Jamaican who successfully fought deportation left free to kill on the streets of Britain. Are we too soft on criminals? Fleet Street legend and my old boss, Kelvin McKenzie, has his say after this short break. Don't go too far.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Honestly, you should be in the studio. No, you shouldn't. Actually, it's time for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators and Kelvin McKenzie speak out on controversial issues without the fear of cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, the circus of our illegal migrant policy rolls on with damning revelations that a knife-wielding criminal whose scores of Labour MPs successfully campaigned to stop getting deported went on to murder a man in London just months later. This is the moment Ernesto Elliott engaged in an 8-minute street brawl where he robbed and murdered his victim with a blade in 2021. Absolutely shocking. 6 months earlier, Elliott was due to be deported to Jamaica on a chartered Boeing 747 after being convicted of separate knife crimes in Britain. Yeah, no surprise. Do-gooder celebrities and Labour MPs penned a letter to the then Home Secretary, Priti Patel, demanding that the plane should not take off, citing the criminal's human rights, never mind the human rights of his victims or anything. The likes of Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, Claudia Webb and Lloyd Russell-Moore all signed it, and it followed a separate letter to the Prime Minister months earlier demanding another plane load of criminals was grounded. That one, crucially, was signed by Keir Starmer. Yeah. So, Kelvin, hello, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. You obviously think that that plane should never have taken off and this chap should have remained in the country and is a lovely guy. Possibly?
Possibly not.
Not, yes.
So
what do you make of this?
There are a number of issues here. First of all, they are all Labour and Lib Dem. There's some Lib Dem Herberts in there as well. They are a shocking collection of the usual suspects, Lammy, Thornbury, Diane Abbott.
Oh, yes.
Now, the issue there is, much of this is race-related because of the Jamaican criminals. So the issue here is that the person that was murdered by the person they stopped leaving the country was of colour. So not only was it a murder, actually, these people acting in an of-colour situation, they were saying, we can't allow these people to go back to Jamaica because what might happen to them. So they have now actually allowed somebody else to be murdered. Who is going to apologise? Is Naomi Campbell going to apologise? Sandy Newton, is she going to apologise? That lady Harris out of the Bonting? They all have allowed their names to go forward. These 60 Labour MPs were doing it for political reasons. So somebody has died in a Greenwich street in the middle of the day for a political reason. So what do the Labour Party say? After all, Lammy today is Foreign Secretary.
Why do our rights always get overlooked? I mean, our rights to be safe on our streets. I mean, as we know, knife crime in London in particular is through the roof. In most of our cities. So why do we, the ordinary people, get forgotten about?
Well, what is quite clear now is that colour does make a difference in terms of what your chances are of getting your voice heard. So there was quite a famous professor signed that particular letter, got involved in it anyway. Now, if that had been somebody of a different colour, a white professor, the chances of him surviving or her surviving in their university would be quite small. What is going to happen to this guy? Is he going to be traduced in some way? Is he going to apologise? On the question of why it is that ordinary people who are white can no longer expect to get a fair crack of the whip, the answer to that is that politicians are scared to be involved unless it is of the minority issue. But you know that to be true. And not only that, so my friends in the United States, they send me time after time after time stuff which actually is making the journey across the Atlantic to here. So we can expect more of this debate.
God, but Kelvin, it's not only violent criminals, is it, we're struggling with? I mean, there's shocking new data out today shows that offences like blackmail, burglary, pickpocketing are just going unpunished because overworked police are saying that they don't have time to deal with it. They're tackling more serious jobs, like the criminals running around who should have been deported. I mean, is this the right approach? We're basically we're saying crime doesn't matter. Carte blanche to go and do what you want.
I think that's the case. The police claim correctly that they have to spend 20% of their time now dealing with mental health issues of people shouting and screaming in the streets. I don't blame the police at all. I'm sure there's some bad eggs in there, nowhere near as bad as some of the people that were out there. I read some stat the other day that apparently if you get a bike stolen in Worcester, in between... By the way, these bikes, anywhere between, say, 120 grand, 120 pounds and 10,000 pounds, it does matter. Just wave a fond farewell to that. It is pointless apart from insurance calling up. For instance, go to a supermarket. If it's less than 200 quid, there is no charge for shoplifting. So there's wholesale shoplifting. So you go around to your local supermarket and speak to the manager there. They know. They go, oh, there's Tom the shoplifter. Watch out for him. Oh, look, Eleanor's in today. And do you know what? Nobody will do a thing about it. Now, why is that? Why is that? And what they say is there aren't enough police. In the same way as we say there aren't enough jails. If actually we should invest the money in the same way as we're talking about investing more money in defence. Why is that? Because a war's started. There is a war going on in our streets and in our towns, and people don't feel that they're being listened to.
We don't feel safe, do we? We do not feel safe on our streets anymore. And as you say, reporting a crime, and I did have a bike stolen, it was a very expensive bike, managed to track it down, and even then the police still wouldn't do anything. It had a tracker on it.
You found the bike?
Yeah, found the bike. It had a tracker on it. I knew where it was, but the police said, no, we can't do anything, and you can't go and get it yourself because it's too dangerous.
Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely.
How far was it from your house?
It was up in Cambridgeshire at the time. It was stolen at the start of the race. In any case.
Well, hold on a second. Whereabouts was it that it was considered too dangerous? Or will that be...
You can't confront criminals, evidently. That's the police job, only they're not doing it, are they? In any case, Kelvin, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much. I should continue the story another day. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And now it's the highlight of everybody's night. Time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. With me to reveal theirs, my panel, Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda DeLucy. Right, let's start with you, Carol. You are sitting there in #1 position.
Yep.
Who is your greatest Britain tonight?
Mine is Betty Boothroyd, the former Tiller girl from Yorkshire, who in 1992 broke 700 years of tradition when she was elected the first female Speaker of the House of Commons. Betty has died at the age of 93. She was an incredible woman, firm, fabulous, formidable, and one of the funniest women I ever met. She was a joy to behold in the House of Commons. She had a fantastic sense of fair play. She was funny and passionate in her belief of sovereignty in Parliament. She was much loved in a way I don't think any speaker has been before or since. We will miss her.
Let's have a quick look at her, shall we, in action. Amazing woman, I agree.
Order! 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 The honourable gentleman will resume his seat immediately. Immediately! Mr. Hughes, spit it out! Come on! There is no point in waiting for silence. The honourable gentleman isn't going to get silence. Produce your voice, Mr. Hughes!
Brilliant. And stood up to the boys and never wore a wig because she didn't want to mess her hair up, so very girly as well. Right, Benjamin, who is your nomination for Greatest Britain?
Mine is a little girl, a 13-year-old called Lucy, who was on Channel 4's The Piano. She is completely blind, she's non-verbal, she's very much autistic, and she can play Chopin and lots of other music perfectly. I've honestly not seen a moment like this on television in a long, long time.
I actually saw this earlier on. Should we have another look, though? She's brilliant, isn't she?
I mean, it's incredible. She can't see a thing, and she's done that.
How does she do it? Belinda, who is your nomination?
My nomination is 23-year-old British boxer Tommy Fury, who won his match against USA's Jake Paul last night. I watched it with my 4 girls. He was absolutely brilliant and a great role model, a great masculine role model for young boys with his discipline, courage and devotion to his wife and child, who he dedicated his win.
Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant. All very good nominations. I'm going to have to go with Carol, though, for Betty Boothroyd, an amazing inspiration. Right, we're coming to the end of the show very, very quickly. Carol, who is your nomination for Jackass?
OK, mine's Rishi Sunak, because despite all the concessions he's got, we've retained the ECJ, which you know, it's sold out breakfast, isn't it? This deal might fix some technical and practical problems, but it does absolutely nothing to restore the UK's sovereignty. Our cabs are ringing us here to tell us they're here. And this goes completely against what 17.4...
Carol, we get it, Rishi. We get it, Rishi. Right, OK, Benjamin.
Boris Johnson, because he hoodwinked the electorate into telling me he had an oven-ready deal. Turns out, still not ready, and he's not even had the guts to turn up in Parliament.
And Belinda, quickly,
I'm shocked I'm saying this, but it has to be Kemi Badenoch for helping the Rishi and Hunt cabal to get into power and the high-tax, soft EU stance that we're now stuck with. Thanks a lot, Kemi.
Blimey, that's a hard one, isn't it? I mean, I'm not even sure. I'm going to go for Boris Johnson. So, Benjamin, you're the winner on that one.
That's just such a...
I mean, that literally never happens.
Right, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been fantastic. Thank you to my panel. And
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree, that's what we like on
Absolutely.
Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us, GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, it's 11 o'clock. You're with GB News. In a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And the Prime Minister has today been addressing the House of Commons, saying the new Brexit trade deal for Northern Ireland means businesses and people can now chart a new way forward. Rishi Sunak said the Windsor Framework, as it's known, will deliver smooth flowing free trade across the UK whilst protecting Northern Ireland's sovereignty. This includes the Northern Ireland Assembly being able to stop some EU laws affecting the flow of goods, which he called the Stormont break. Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed the new deal, adding the red and green lane